Well, for those of you that are just listening and you're just joining to our podcast, we've been in a conversation called An Introduction to Love, an invitation to a new understanding of love. What we're doing is we're walking through what some scholars have called a literary masterpiece. Some scholars have even argued that what we're reading is not one of, but the most profound chapter in all of the biblical narrative, all right? We're walking through a passage that you've probably heard read at weddings. It's out of 1 Corinthians. It's 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we're just kind of going like Greek phrase by Greek phrase through this particular writing. And so far, we are way behind schedule, okay? When I initially wrote this whole series, like, oh, that'd be a fun series in June because like Pride Month, and I was like, so we'll do it for like 4 weeks. We're now on week 4, I think, and we're not even through the intro of what Paul is saying. So this might be one of the longest series we ever do. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm like, I'm not gonna fight it. All right, I'm gonna embrace it, and we're just gonna keep going line by line. All right. Now, part of the hope of this series is that you and I discover a new way of understanding love that hopefully can change the way we interact with everything. I want to kind of give you an invitation or permission to explore a deeper, wider, and countercultural understanding of love. Now, a little bit of context just for all of you new folks that are here. This letter that you often heard read at weddings out of 1 Corinthians 13 does have some context. It's important for you to know that because this isn't like some sappy like poem that's given to a group of people so we can just think about love and how that feels amazing, although it does. Paul is actually writing this letter, and he's in the midst of like an extended riff, right? So his whole thing starts in like chapter 12, and it ends in chapter 14. And so his whole riff on love sits right in the middle of a longer argument. Now, Paul started this spiritual collective or this church roughly around 51 Common Era, and he's writing this letter about 55 Common Era. And what you need to know is the reason he's writing this letter is because word's gotten back to him that this spiritual collective that he helped start in Corinth is just fighting over everything. Now, I know we have to use our imaginations about family fights, but just go with me, okay? I mean, these folks are disagreeing over everything, and we'll go through some of those as time goes on. But you could just imagine they don't agree politically, they don't agree theologically, and they're arguing about so much, and they're choosing sides. That's a big thing that's going on because they had different teachers. So some are like Team Apollos, some are Team Cephas, some are Team Paul, and then there's a group of people that are Team Jesus, which there's always a Team Jesus, right? And there's all this argument going on. And so Paul's like, oh my God, you all are living so much in your head and you're debating so much about theology that you've forgotten the most important thing, right? And this is where Paul picks up. Now, back in the first century, when the spiritual collectives would gather like this, they would basically be given these letters. So like Paul would write this, he would hand it off to a good spokesman, and someone within that collective would get up and they would just read the letter, right? So I want to read the letter to you, and we'll just go down and just pick up one more Greek phrase, and we'll just riff on that for a little bit today, and then we'll be out of here. How's that sound? Because it's summertime and the sun's out, and we got stuff to do, all right? And by stuff, I mean golf. Okay, so here we go, all right? 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. Now, imagine this, all right? Church is fighting over everything. They can't see eye to eye on anything. And somebody in the church gets up and they read this letter. And just opening line is fire, all right? Listen to this. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. That's a pretty strong starter. Verse 2. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Now it's here that Paul shifts, and he begins to introduce us to love. Now, I want to pause here and say this. Paul is trying to give language to something that is beyond language, okay? Paul is not just talking about a particular kind of love, like we walk through like different understandings of love in that particular moment. So eros, erotic, eros love, romantic love, right? You've heard of that one. You've heard of like phileo, Philadelphia, brotherly love. You've heard of this. You've heard of storge, which is like parental child love. All that's great. But Paul chooses to use a Greek word that wasn't used a lot. Some scholars argue that Plato in his Symposium uses it, and then perhaps maybe it even started with Homer, but it wasn't a very heavy word that was used in the culture at the time. And I think, it's my assumption, if I were writing a thesis, it would be that Paul chooses to use this word because it isn't already predominantly co-opted by other meanings. Because the reason he does that, and he uses the word agape, and the reason he does that is because I think he's trying to get at something that's larger than even the love we experience here, right? Now, I am going to share a little bit more with you today, just a personal story, but I have had maybe one or two, possibly three encounters with the only word I can give you is love. And my brief encounters with it, I encountered enough, tasted enough to know that it is a love that is so different than even the love I have experienced in everyday real time here. And when I say that, hear me, the love I experience in everyday real time here is actually pretty amazing. Wouldn't you agree? Don't you love being loved by people? Isn't it lovely? My parents were in town this week, and my dad on the 17th hole, by the way, we tied up, just for the record, all right? We played golf. We tied up. And then he's like, do you want to go into overtime? I'm like, yeah, I do. So we went back and played a hole. He beat me by a stroke, all right? So, but check this out. 16th hole, we're on the tee box. My dad leans over and he said, son, I just want you to know I love you. I love you. That feels good. Has anyone ever, when's the last time you were told you love you? By the way, when's the last time you were told you love you and you knew they meant it? Do you know what I'm talking about? You ever been told you're loved and you're like, I don't know if I'm buying it? You ever felt that before? Have you ever been told you're loved by someone, by like a religious person, and you just thought they were lying? You know what I'm talking about? Have you been told you're loved by someone, but you know when they told you they loved you, they were only doing it to make themselves look good? Well, I've experienced that. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? And it almost, if we're not careful, like it cheapens this word love. If you're here and that word's been cheaper for you, hey, another one. If you're here and you've been in like a religious institution or system where you've been abused in the name of love, stuff like this can get real like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm aware of all of that. I just want you to know something. All of our experiences of love are only just brief, pale shadows of what I believe Paul is talking about here, okay? It's almost like the sun is the source of love, agape, and all the rays are just emanations that we experience from that love. And think about it. The times you felt love the most, how amazing was that experience? Now imagine that to the 10th power, right? Yes. That is what I think Paul is getting. He knows he's not trying to change people's perspectives, I don't think, in 1 Corinthians 13. I don't think he's trying to convince them, oh my God, people, you just need to believe in love, all right? No. I think what Paul is doing is he's going, I've had some encounters with love that has transformed me, and all I want to do is point to that love, and maybe you yourselves can have some of those encounters. And so he shifts and he begins to describe love. Now, describing love, he uses 15 verbs. Of those 15 verbs, the first two are positive. Then he moves into like a negative understanding. So he basically says love is this, but love is not X, Y, Z. All right. Now we'll get to those in a couple years. All right. But for now, I just want to start. I want to start here. All right. Last week we took this one phrase. All right. So in verse 4, he says, love is patient. Now, if you missed last week, God, one of my favorites. All right. And I don't say that a lot about my own sermons. All right. But one of my favorites, love is patient. And by patient, I just want you to know, love, the kind of love I've experienced and the kind of love Paul's talking about, does not get in a hurry. Love is not rushed. And here's why. Because though love operates in a space-time continuum, love, agape love, doesn't operate in the space-time continuum. There is no time. Time is a social construct that we have created. Love doesn't exist in there. You can experience it, but love exists outside of time. It's patient, all right? And then he moves to a new phrase, and this is one I want to give us today. Love is patient. Love is kind, all right? Now, even saying the word kind, probably mixed emotions in here. Some of you are probably like, yeah, it's kind. Some of you may be here going, oh, isn't that cute? Kind. And I can just tell by your posture and your demeanor, you're like, this is going to be a great sermon. You're going to talk to us about kindness? Where's your vest, Mr. Rogers? Do you know what I'm talking about? We're actually going to get to Mr. Rogers because I actually think he mastered love is kind. And we're going to talk about how profound and transforming his life actually was. Maybe we'll get to it depending on what time we have. I know we have some Methodists in the house today, too. And let me just say to my Methodist friends, because I went to school at Candler, we don't give 15-minute talks here. We give longer sermons, but I'll do my best to keep it in a reasonable frame for all of you, okay? Okay, so love is kind. Now, let me start here with a working definition. This is Webster's working definition of kindness, so we just kind of know where we're coming from. Webster says kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate, okay? Now, flip that. Webster says unkindness is being inconsiderate or harsh behavior, okay? Last week, we talked about love being patient. That was about forbearance, endurance. That's about love. Love doesn't get in a hurry. Love isn't delayed. Love just simply is. It always is. That's the only thing we can say. That's why I think Paul starts with love is. Before he gets into the verbs describing them, he wants you to know, no, love just is. That's the thing about love. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Love just is. It always is. There's never a time when it isn't. Love is present. Love just is. It's here. It's now. And it never backs up. And it's never closer or beyond. Love is just always here. The question is, are we aware of it? Have we experienced it? Are we aware of how close it actually is? But then he says love is patient. And in some ways, it's just like love is patient with you. Love is patient with me. Even in the moments when you're not patient with love, love is still patient with you. And that's the beauty about love. It's just here. It's with you. All right? But this next phrase plays in with that one. So love is patient, which, in kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of like forbearance, endurance. It just always is. But the second one, love is kind, is about like active goodness in the life of someone else. Okay? So I would word it like this. Kindness is about actively working for universal human flourishing. Now, all those words matter to me. Kindness is about actively working for universal human flourishing. That means the flourishing of those I choose to love and the flourishing of those that I have a hard time loving. And in the context of 1 Corinthians, I would imagine Paul is pointing towards this love going, I want you to know about the experience of love I've had, and that experience of love is kind to those who are kind and to those who are unkind. Come on now. God, that's a good word. Here's the thing. It's easy to be kind to people that are kind. The challenge is being kind to people that are unkind. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does anyone in here have unkind people in their sphere? Now, I bet, sometimes we open the floor. I bet if we opened the floor and I started over here and we passed out mics, it's like, just name one unkind person. You probably have a list. Charles, Sarah in retail. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you probably just have just a list. Father-in-law, mother-in-law, all in-laws. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you probably just unkind, like just, yeah. Yes. It's like in context, you have to understand, Paul is saying this, but he's saying this to a group of people that can't see eye to eye on anything. And so when he talks about kindness, I want you to know at its very essence, kindness is about actively working for universal human flourishing. And that, by the way, is one of the missions, if not the mission, of what we do here in this space. We exist, we still gather on a Sunday in the heart of the Bible Belt as a, quote, progressive, unquote, progressive space, as a space that's ever evolving. And a part of what we do here is we are working toward universal human flourishing. And I mean the flourishing of all humans, because as we know, Dr. King's told us well, if one person's in bondage, we're all in bondage. And if everybody isn't free, no one's free. And so we're working for the liberation of all people. Because I don't know if you know this. Yes, the oppressed need to be liberated. But I want you know who's in more bondage? The oppressor, right? And the oppressor needs to be liberated. And so when Paul talks about love being kind, this kindness is about wanting and seeking good for others. And I would say we could easily over-spiritualize this. I wonder if Paul isn't just straight up talking about human decency. Human decency. As in, what if the people we disagreed with, we stop dehumanizing them? God, we're good at that, aren't we? I see it a lot. I would imagine you do. We're like people dehumanize one side and the other side dehumanizes the other side. And it's almost like Paul. And isn't it wild that we live in a culture where this is still a radical idea? But it's almost like Paul's going, hey, can we just have a quick conversation about human decency? It sounds so elementary, doesn't it? But can you imagine him saying that in the midst of like all these like deep theological spiritual people? Because they're all like priding themselves, like, oh, I got it all figured out. There's a whole chapter on resurrection, and there's a whole big fight. And there are groups of people in different camps. Like, I tell you whatever you want to know. I know what the Bible says. I've got this thing down. And then Paul's like, okay, great. You all keep all of your theology, all of your Christology, all of your heady information about the divine. And I'm glad, hear me, that you and God are exactly the same human, and you know all about mystery, and that's fantastic. But I also need to tell you about something. I don't know about your theology because it isn't producing very good fruit. What I can tell you is, in the midst of why you study your own deep understandings of the divine, we should probably have a conversation about human decency because it's lacking here. Yeah. And so Paul says, I just want to remind you that the love that I've experienced, that I'm trying to introduce you to, it's kind. Now, when I talk about kindness, I'm aware of the fact that many of us, including myself, I don't think we understand the power of kindness, because when I hear kindness, I have to be honest with you, particularly in the institution that I was raised in, first of all, I assume kindness means niceness, which I don't think. I think they're two different words, which you could probably parse out at like a Books and Bonfire later, you know what I mean? But when I hear kindness, I do have to tell you this. There is a very small section of me. Now, I have evolved since then, but there's a very small section of me that when I hear kindness, I think passive. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you just let people walk over you and you just like, have a good day. Do you know what I'm talking? That's how when I hear kindness, honestly, when I hear kindness, it doesn't sound very authentic to me. Honestly, it's very like sanctimoniously kind of putting on like just a face of just like, I was running this week, and I put on the new Taylor Swift album. I listened to it once, but I never really listened to it all the way through, and I'm a big lyric guy. Billie Eilish just released an album that I love, and I've always loved her. I love female dark singers. They're my favorite people. God, Billie Eilish has got some good stuff. But I listen to Taylor. I'm not like a huge Taylor Swift fan, largely because it's so ubiquitous now. When something gets big, I drop it. You know what I'm talking about? That's why I still love Vining's Flake. Listen, the day we become a mega church is the day I resign. Hold me to it. Hold me to it. The day we explode is the day I look at Joe and the board and I'm like, I'm out. All right. But when Taylor got big, it's like, I love like people that don't know about certain things. And, but I was listening to one of her songs, and she has one called "I Can Do It With a Broken Heart," right? And the sentiment behind it, I totally get. But she talks a little bit in the song just about how she's learned to like put on a front and just smile, even if she has a broken heart. And I understand what she's getting at. But I'm also like, wow, imagine if we lived in a world where you didn't have to fake anything. Like performance wasn't like on the agenda. Where we could actually, because I'll be honest, a part of what I think my wife and I have struggled most with when it comes to like religion and church and is just so much blatant hypocrisy. Does anyone else struggle with that? And honestly, even right now, can we just say it out loud? Like, I got to be honest. I talked to my dad briefly about it. I try to stay clear, but I'm like, genuinely, like, what happened? What happened to the evangelicals who raised me? I mean, honestly, what happened? And if you're not careful, you start to get a little bit cynical because you start going, was it all a lie? Do you know what I'm saying? Because I remember, can we just, yeah, we can. I keep asking you all, and I realize I'm the leader. They used to get on to me at school about that, too. They're just like, you keep asking, can we? Yeah, you answer it, all right? I remember when Clinton was in office, and I remember the day when it was released, he was like, I did not have sexual relations. Do you remember that famous? Well, were you all around for that? And I just remember, because I grew up in, like, the moral majority and the evangelical movement, and I remember, God, they torched that guy. Like, just, they're like, it's all, and I just remember, it's all about integrity and character, and God, can you imagine if you'd fast-forwarded to our time now? And all I'm saying is I'm looking back going, what? The evangelicals are very quiet about integrity and character right now. And I'm not going to ask who that was, but someone's like, sure are. Somebody's ready to tweet, all right? I need to remind you, love is kind. Which, by the way, does bring up a great point, and I'm glad you said it. We don't have time, but it would be good to talk about forms of kindness and how kindness gives expression, because I also want you to know ignoring injustice is not being kind. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Kindness is speaking up for the marginalized, right? But I remember that, and now I look back and I'm like, what happened? Because I'll be honest with you, I grew up in this. I think they meant well in the early days. And then now you see this shift, and I think to myself, oh my goodness, was the allegiance? And I here's where I start to wonder. I start to wonder if their little sermons about integrity and character were all like a lie. We're all just a veneer to support their political agendas. And now that it's reversed, I think what's happening is you're starting to see for what it really is, a support of political agendas. And all of a sudden it's like we don't care anymore about integrity and character. And I am talking about it. But I'm going to stop now, all right? But we'll continue it later, okay? Okay. Here's all I'm saying. I think when we talk about, like, kindness, the reason I bring that up is because there has to be something in here about compassion for a minute, okay? Because someone's like, how do you get kindness if you don't have it? I think it comes from a place of compassion. And when I say compassion, I want you to understand this. Compassion is empathy with the suffering of others and a capacity to feel how others feel. Okay? The Latin root of the word compassion is the compound of com, which means with, and passion, which is suffer. So it gives us the meaning, check this out, compassion means to suffer with. Compassion is entering into the pain of another. It is feeling the suffering of someone else, experiencing it, sharing it, tasting it. This is why, by the way, when I make statements about character and integrity, hear me when I say this. I say that to say, I come from a place, I know, these are my family members I'm talking about. I have compassion because here's what I wonder. I wonder, what kind of suffering is someone going into that they would turn their eye to integrity and character just to continue to go in that direction? Hear me, I think that comes from a place of pain and suffering, and I don't think we're doing a very good job at deep listening to one another. Because I wonder, what led you to that? What is it? What led you to a place to want power? Okay, white supremacy, let's talk about white supremacy. Let's keep undoing the layers here. So in many ways, I want you to know, Trump's not the problem. I know it's easy for us to go take gun and shoot. He's not the problem. Now, he may be a problem, but he's not the problem. Hear me. What he is a mirror showing us what we don't want to see about our own nation. And I want you to know, as hard as we may, and we work for justice, and we work for, yes, but hear me. I'm just praying the universe gives us everything we need for the evolution of our own consciousness. And sometimes it may be hard for us to see, but if it means the layers are peeled back and we have to, and we're the generation, it just so happened. Aren't you grateful? Sometimes I'm like, why was I born now? Could I have been born? So, but we're here now. And if we're the generation that actually can take the bandages off that we've been trying to hide and cover up, and maybe we could start a healing process where we just slowly take the bandages off and maybe pour some ointment on there like, hey, we've got a lot of healing to do. And there's a lot of wounds. And it's time for us to get to work. And and if we're going to do it, what if we did it in small little communities around the world and we called it like Vinings Lake? Yeah, I could get on board with that. Now, I'll say all that to say that takes work. So when Paul says love is kind, I don't think he's just like passive kindness. No, when he says love is kind, hear me when I say this, I'm talking about like it takes courage to be kind. Kindness is not necessarily niceness either. Kindness has more power to transform people than I think we realize. Kindness is dangerous. Can we say that? Kindness can break down the highest walls. Kindness can diffuse the most extreme situations. Kindness can melt the hardest of hearts. Kindness has a unique power to influence people. Kindness can reconcile the most estranged relationships. Kindness is fierce. I want to give you a statement that maybe can be a mantra that you run with this week. Kindness is far more persuasive than rightness. You remember that this week? Kindness is far more persuasive than rightness. Now, my evangelical upbringing would not agree with that. For many of them, it's all about being right. And I would say to all of us, if being right exceeds you being kind, it might be time for you to rethink your theology. Kindness is far more persuasive than rightness. What do you mean by that? What I mean by that is this. Anyone who's ever shaped me, molded me, or influenced me has been most appealing and attractive when they've been the most kind humans I've ever met. Because when I see kindness, I'm compelled, drawn to it. And here's what really happens. I want to be more like that. So when someone comes to me and they come with me with an idea, but they come with a level of kindness, and I don't mean like fake kindness. I don't mean like dress it up kindness. I mean kindness, genuine, authentic kindness that exudes from them. Well, then I'm compelled. I'm attracted to that. I want more of that. And you all, most of you know this. When you grow up in a religious institution where they approach things not with kindness, but with hatred, and not even with hatred, but with fear, and not even just fear, but when they approach things as if you don't have a choice, and there's some sense of anger, yeah, I'm right. This is right. Well, great, but do you have to be a jerk about it? Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's your jerkiness that's not very attractive. And if what you believe is making you a jerk, I don't want that belief. Because being a jerk is not persuading anyone. You know? Yeah, most of you know that. You know what Proverbs is like the book of wisdom? Proverbs 15:1. I don't read a lot of Proverbs, but Proverbs 15:1 has been one that I've tucked in and held for a long time because I have found it to be true. And tell me if you don't know this is true, all right? A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. That's very basic, very elementary, but if you go to social media, you know that's true. You can diffuse an argument with a soft answer. You can, every time. Part of the problem is, here we go, let's get a little Eckhart Tolle in here. We associate who we are with what we believe. And so when someone comes at our beliefs, we think they're coming at us. And what do? Defend ourselves. Well, imagine if you were so grounded in who you were that you didn't associate your essence with your beliefs. All of a sudden, what you'll realize is people can say all day long, I don't believe in that, that's heretical, that's da-da-da-da-da, and you can just look and smile and be like, that's cool, that's all good, great, that's where I'm at, love you, you want to hang out, grab lunch, grab a drink? Yeah, we can do that because we can disagree and actually still maintain a relationship. That's a foreign idea for a lot of us. It's something that we work on as a family all the time. It's something I'm working on with my parents right now. We are continually, very explicitly choosing our relationship again and again and again. Because we keep saying it, but we wonder if it's true. Do we value this relationship more than we do the church? Do we value this relationship more than we do our theology? Do we value, what is the essence of all of this we're talking about? And we just believe it's what Paul is saying. Love. Love. Okay. Now, all of that mentioned, the Corinthians are spouting deep theology, but they're being incredibly unkind to one another. Vitriol, slander, meanness, sarcasm. I think sarcasm may be the word. It may be the word. It may be the word for Gen Z. I'm on the edge of millennial. I was born in 81. I'm told it starts in like 80 or 81. So I'm like, I'll claim it. But God, sarcasm, disdain, even abuse. But vitriol, there's so much. You get on social media, it's just flying back and forth. And I had to ask this question, and I know there's a wide variety of spiritual perspectives and wisdom traditions here, but a lot of us, the mother tongue is Christianity, so we have to ask, I wonder why Christians are so unkind. I've heard this phrase before, and I think it's true, but I heard someone say, I think it went something like this, there is no hate quite like Christian love. Do you know what I'm saying? When a Christian says they love something, God, they can be the most hateful humans. I mean, some of the most unkind, and this is part of when I started deconstructing my own faith, is when some of the most unkind people were those who claimed to be Christians, and then some of the kindest people were like Muslims to me. One of my friends at the time we brought here before, but he does true Islam. And I remember the day looking at him going, my God, he's more like Jesus than the evangelical I know. So you have to ask the question, I wonder why Christians are so unkind. And I do want to give a little bit of answer here. I think a lot of unkindness, and not just with Christians, but with the human species, I think the word is fear for a lot of us. Fear. And so part of the problem is most of our religion is based on fear, depends on fear, and peddles more fear. And part of the reason that is because fear creates codependency. And to keep the institution going and to keep the lights on and to keep the pockets filled and the private jets going, they know the most powerful force that we have is fear. And I also think many of us were conditioned to be unkind growing up in the church. I mean, a lot of us came through an era where Jesus was a fighting warrior. And you heard phrases like fight the good fight and onward Christian soldiers, and you were handed apologetics. There's all these war metaphors of we're going to battle. Who are we fighting? The liberals. Do you know what I'm talking? That was my church. Now, coincidentally, they made a parallel between the devil and the liberals. Do you know what I mean? Because they were one and the same. And that was who we were fighting. And so what naturally happens is you grow up and you just walk around with shields trying to defend. God, we used to take courses in that. Defend the faith. Fight for it. Man, I laid down my shield a long time ago. And a part of the reason is because I realized if truth in love is what truth in love is, it can take care of itself. I'm going to work for those on the underside, but I'm not going to sit here with a big shield going, you can't say that. You can't do. You can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. What I want you to understand is that love, if we understand just how powerful this thing is that we're talking about, that I believe Paul's talking about, hear me, I don't care what weapons come against it. It cannot be destroyed. I'm telling you this. If I could give you anything to rest in and rely on, love can be trusted this morning. Love can be trusted. That kid who's wavering right now in your life, you're worried. I don't know if he's going down the right direction. What is this? And it's just, you're holding on. You're holding on. What if you entrusted him to love? What if you entrusted her to love? What if you entrusted them to love? That spouse, that partner, whatever. What if you entrusted them to love? Now, let me just say this, and we gotta kind of wrap it up here. You guys have been great. I want you to understand a couple of things. First of all, let me say, theology is only good as the fruit that it produces. There's another mantra for us. Theology is only as good as the fruit that it produces. So if you're unkind, your theology isn't worth very much. Okay? If your theology doesn't result in more kindness toward others, then it needs to be deconstructed. Because here's what I know that you know, but it's good to be reminded. Our actions are the fruit that reveals the root. You understand? So if you're walking around with a lot of anger and a lot of frustration and a lot of unkindness and a lot of vitriol and a lot of abuse, it might be that you need to look and say, okay, don't judge, observe, and then say, I wonder what's going on in the root system here. Maybe there's some things that we need to check.